Record. Go for it, Cindy.
All right. So I'll share my screen here. And as you know, most of you know, and probably are readers of this, every Sunday, we publish a legislative action newsletter. And it comes to your email, might come to your junk mail, but it should come to your email. But if for some reason you don't see it in your email, you can also get it by going to the legislative uh, lwvwa.org website and then under advocacy action newsletters. So the archives are also there. So this is this week's, and as we've done is we prioritize a few action alerts. We're at this point in the session as these paragraphs explain that the policy committee work is finished for this part of the session, and now they're working their way, the bills are working their way through the money committees, the appropriations, ways and means, capital budget, finance, and also transportation. There's a lot of work there as well as on the floor. So you won't see a lot of action alerts this week, but there are some. And when you can do there to see all action alerts. Oops, page not found. That's not good. All right. That's all right. I've got something up here. Please do interrupt me when our guest comes.
Braille is online, Cindy.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you. I will stop sharing and we will move on to Braille.
Okay. Thanks. And we're recording. And so I'll circle back and just say good morning, everybody. And thank you for Zooming in this morning. I'm Wendy Pierce. I'm a member of the democracy team, as many of you already know by now, along with Cindy Madigan, Carol Sullivan, and Marilyn Byfield. We're going to have a full hour packed with information about two very different issues affecting Washington residents and voters. In our first 30 minutes approximately, we'll be learning about Washington's mature forests, why they matter, what's being done to preserve and protect them. And our presenter is going to be Brel Frobe, director of the Center for Responsible Forests. Brel is an educator and a community organizer. And as I happen to see on the center's website, he lives in the occupied Lummi and Nooksack territory of Bellingham. And we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us this morning, Brel, and we look forward to hearing more about your background and the work you're doing to protect our forests and our watersheds. And then in our second half hour, we're going to be hearing from Thurston County Auditor Mary Hall. Mary's going to speak to us about her priority legislation for this session, and she will also touch on even year elections from the auditor's perspective. Mary was elected auditor in 2013 and began her elections career in Pierce County, later receiving her national certification in elections administration. She has received multiple awards in addition to the 2020 Auditor of the Year award for her work during the pandemic, where she coordinated protection measures for voters that included drive-through voting. Since the presidential election of 2016, Mary's focus has been to protect elections by improving the county's cybersecurity. She currently serves as chair of the Washington State Association of County Auditors Legislative Committee. And I don't know if we were recording yet or if everybody was on board, but Mary does have a hard stop right before 11 as she has to go to another meeting at that time. So thank you in advance, Mary, for squeezing us in. There'll be an opportunity for some questions as time allows, so you can use either the hand raise or the chat, and we'll do our best to field everybody in the time allowed. So with that, Brel, I'll pass the torch to you for the first segment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy. Really appreciate the invitation to come and chat with y'all. And yeah, thank you so much, Carol Sullivan, for organizing this and inviting me to come speak. And also a lot of big gratitude to Kate Lunsford and Karen Crowley and League of Women Voters, Snohomish County. They've been doing incredible work on the issue of mature forest conservation in their county and statewide. So yeah, so grateful to get to work with the League of Women Voters on this issue. Yeah, so again, my name is Brel Frobe, Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Forestry. I've been with the center for about 2.5 years now, and my work with the center started really on a really local, personal level. There was a forest right above where I grew up on the Nooksack River that was getting about to get logged. This beautiful, beautiful, nearly old growth forest that plays a really important role in the watershed that's under threat right now for a number of reasons, including the impacts of industrial logging over the past 2 centuries. Yeah, so it started off really in my backyard, but as I learned more about the important role that forests play in fighting climate change and making our communities more resilient to climate change, um, I got more and more involved, not just in my community, but in communities all around Western Washington and supporting communities in doing community organizing to protect the forests that are really play important roles in their communities. And also over the past 2 years, the center has expanded from just looking at individual campaigns and struggles to stop timber sales to a desire to really get a policy change statewide that can really protect all of these mature and old growth forests. There's a term that was coined that's called legacy forests that really refers to these forests as legacies of a different time that are so different than the forests that dominate the landscape that are these industrial tree plantations that most of our forest lands have been converted to. Um, so there's only a few acres left. There's only about 70,000, we estimate, acres left of these mature forests on the landscape in Western Washington. And specifically, I should clarify on state lands in Western Washington. Our organization only really focuses on state managed lands. The regulatory policies are really different when you look at private, federal, and state. And really different modes of engagement and policies for each of those three categories of land. So yeah, we really focus on state lands. So I guess before going too much more into this issue, it'd be helpful just to get a sense, maybe if folks know how to kind of use the hand raise react on Zoom, to just get a show of hands of how many people have heard about mature and old growth forests and legacy forests and kind of the important role that they play in combating the negative impacts of climate change. Great. Wonderful. It seems like most people. Okay. So I was really hoping to focus in the time that we have together on the legislative session, since that's really what's happening right now. So it's because most of us seem fairly somewhat familiar with the issue. I'm not going to spend too much time going into it, but I will give a brief overview of why these forests are important and why we're fighting for them this session, and then kind of dive into what we're doing in this moment right now. And with the time that remains, hopefully we'll have a few moments for questions, and I'm happy to send more follow-up information. And our website, which I'll put in the chat, has a really good overview of these forests and why they're important. So I think just referring folks who maybe aren't as familiar with this issue to our website will be a good starting place for those folks that want to learn a little bit more about why these forests are important. So as I mentioned, we're really focusing on these last remaining 70,000 acres of mature forests in Western Washington that are managed by the Department of Natural Resources. And these forests are managed primarily for the benefit of generating revenue for county governments, for universities, for schools, for building buildings in the state capitol. Since the formation of the state of Washington, there's been this use of this land, of logging and clear cutting our forests turning them into plantations, and then the revenue from logging goes to funding these services. And so there's this tough situation where we need revenue, especially for rural communities that have been historically dependent on this revenue to fund schools and fire stations and things of that nature. And then we have this climate crisis that is existential, and it's a really tough decision, right? Like to be put in, the position to be put into of which one to choose. And so we're really looking for solutions that meet both of those needs, and looking at different funding sources that can both make rural communities and all of our needs on a state level economically whole, while also preserving these last remaining mature legacy forests. And just really briefly on why these forests are so important. I said earlier that they make our communities more resilient to climate change. So the best available climate science and forest ecological science shows us that mature forests are significantly more resilient when it comes to wildfire, when it comes to drought, when it comes to having plentiful and clean water, which is important both for our drinking water and for salmon that are imperiled in many watersheds right now. And then, of course, the orcas that depend on the salmon. So, indigenous folks who've lived on this land since time immemorial know the deep interconnection between all of these species and the ecological cycle that exists, that Western science is just now, what's the word, like, acknowledging, that's not quite the word, but yeah, like proving through scientific means that this truth is true. And so these mature forests play a really, really important role in the health of our watersheds, and that becomes magnified and intensified when we look at the negative impacts of climate change, which are wildfire and drought and species loss, right? The biodiversity crisis that is co-occurring with the climate crisis. So we really believe that these mature forests are our state's and our region's best natural climate solution. And as I'm sure all of you are familiar with, recently there's been a huge shift in Washington state policy when it comes to climate change. So Washington recently initiated the Climate Commitment Act, and which is just a quick overview, but I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with, charging polluters for emissions and slowly scaling down the amount of emissions that are allowed, and the money that's generated from taxing polluters goes to climate solutions. And there's a special account that's specifically for what's called quote unquote natural climate solutions. And this account, we believe, is best used for conserving mature forests because of not only their ability to make our communities more resilient, but their incredible ability to capture and suck out CO2 and store it in the trees as biomass. So storing and capturing carbon, these mature forests are just incredibly powerful at that. So yeah, we believe that our mature forests are our best natural climate solutions for that reason. And as also many of you also probably know, there's an effort right now to appeal the CCA. And so we believe that looking for ways to prove to the legislature and to the public that that the CCA is really important and doing really important work to make our communities safer when it comes to climate change, it's important to be spending this money on those things rather than just using it as extra a slush fund for the legislature to spend on whatever they want to. So yeah, kind of moving into what's happening this session. So last legislative session was the first year that CCA funds were available to the legislature. And So the Center for Responsible Forestry teamed up with Conservation Northwest and Washington Conservation Action and a number of other regional environmental and conservation groups around Western Washington to try to get these funds to conserve mature forests and to make our communities economically whole. So replacing that revenue that would have been generated from logging the forests and buying replacement lands that can be logged instead. So these replacement lands have already been transformed and turned into plantations. So they're already tree farms and they're already being used for industrial logging. So we feel like those lands are much more appropriately used for logging than these intact ecosystems that are on the chopping block. So buying replacement lands to continue to fund our communities and putting mature forests into conservation is the vision. And we were successful in getting funds to conserve 2,000 acres last legislative session. And it's a really big deal because this is the first time that there's been a movement like this in Washington state to get forests protected by means other than what is in policy. So there's lots of different forest regulations and policies around what kind of forests can and can't be cut. But this is the first time that the people of Washington state have really been ahead of the game of looking at what is best available science and really pushing the state to change its policy. And we're hoping that this is the first step towards that. So 2,000 acres were conserved. And of the 2,000 acres, there were acres conserved in Whatcom County, Snohomish County, King County, Clallam County, and Jefferson County. So 5 counties got lands conserved in the 2,000 acres. However, there were at least 8 counties, possibly more, that wanted to participate in getting their mature forest conserved through this means. And so the demand was really, really high. And I see that there's a few folks on here from Thurston County. So Thurston County is a great example of a county that, since the very beginning of this movement to conserve mature forests, has been asking the Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, they want all of their mature forests conserved. And unfortunately, DNR hasn't really been responsive to that request. So Thurston County surprisingly didn't get any acres conserved last legislative session. And so we really want to shift that. So for the counties that got very few to no acres last funding round, we want to make those communities included in future rounds. I see a question in the chat. Okay, I will get to this question in 1 second. So this round, this legislative session, we are asking for less funds and less acres than last time, and that's partly because we're in a short session. There's less time to really do a full campaign, and we're really, because it's a short session, we're using the momentum from last session to kind of build and add to what was done last time. So we're again working in a coalition with a number of groups, including the Washington State Association of Counties, or WASAC, which historically has been very pro logging, but they really saw the value in teaming up with conservation groups to ask for funds for these replacement lands because they saw how it benefited counties. And that's that's going a little bit into the weeds, and I don't think we have time to explain the ins and outs of that, but I'm happy to explain more offline about why this is such an important alliance, and why I think it's really great for counties and conservation to be working more closely. So this year we're asking for $34 million, and that would go to buying replacement lands, both for conservation and for these real timber-dependent rural counties like Wahkiakum, Skamania, Pacific, Jefferson, and Clallam counties have all been really, really impacted by conservation. And so they need replacement lands for all of the lands that have been put into conservation. So we're asking for $34 million. And that money would go to conserving around 600 acres this time of mature forests. And we're specifying which counties really need this the most. As I mentioned before, only certain counties got it last time and certain counties didn't. So we're really focusing on the counties that didn't get it or got very, very few acres. So those counties include Thurston County, as I mentioned, Kitsap County, Pierce County, and Snohomish County. Let's see, Thurston, Kitsap, Pierce, and Snohomish County are the 4 counties that we're focusing on this time. So 600 acres divided between those 4 counties. And we're really looking at the areas that are most at threat of being logged in the next 1 to 2 years. We're really hoping that when we have a new lands commissioner and after the November elections, that the political environment will be more conducive to doing a total policy change. And so we really see these 600 acres as kind of like a Band-Aid or a way to kind of get us to that point where we can get a larger policy change and protect the forests that are about to be logged in the next year. So that's really what the intent behind the 600 acres. And also it just seemed like what was politically possible this session. Of course, we would love to have done 3,000 acres or 8,000 acres, but these 600 acres will have a significant impact on taking some of the most beautiful, ecologically significant forests that would otherwise be logged in the next 1 to 2 years off the chopping block. So there are 2 things that we would love your engagement on and your help with to be successful this session. One is to really there's a question about acreage. So I think my question, this question around acreage will be answered in a moment when I share out some resources. So I guess before I move forward, one question I have for this group, are there folks here that are planning on doing some citizen lobbying with their representatives this session? Is that something that this group focuses on at all? Maybe I can get like a raise of hands of people that are planning on speaking with their senators or representatives in the next couple of weeks. Great. Okay, so there's about a handful of folks that are planning on doing that. So there's a need to really talk with legislators about this budget ask. It's not going to be a bill, but it's going to be a proviso, a line item in the budget that we're really hoping to get included, this $34 million. So we have a 1-pager that really breaks down all of the details of the proviso that we're hoping to get passed. And what we would be so grateful to folks if they would be willing in their citizen lobbying efforts to mention this proviso when they're meeting with legislators. So I'm going to post the link to this proviso or to the 1-pager in the chat. And that'll answer all of your questions around kind of like the breakdown of dollars. So just in brief, the 34 million isn't all going to the 600 acres. It's also going to what are called encumbered counties. So those 5 counties that I mentioned that have been really heavily hit by taking lands out of logging circulation. And so it's also going to replacing their lands. We estimate that replacing the mature forests costs around $22,000 an acre rather than $57,000. So about 40% of the $34 million will go to mature forest conservation, and 60% will go towards these encumbered counties. And we really believe that there actually is a huge carbon climate benefit to the encumbered side too, because what this is doing is taking private lands and putting them into public management. And we know that public management of lands is way, way better when it comes to environmental regulations, when it comes to buffers on streams and rivers, and leaving trees that are big trees. So the climate benefits are significant on both sides of this proviso. So this one pager that I shared, I think will answer a lot of your questions around the ins and outs, but I would just ask you and be eternally grateful to all of you in the short amount of time that you have with your meetings with legislators to mention the importance of this. I know that probably all of you have issues that you care deeply about, and time is limited in these short meetings, but any airtime that you're willing to share and to mention this proviso would be so, so grateful. And the other thing that we really need help with is creating a drumbeat in the grassroots. So all of you are folks that are deeply politically engaged, and I imagine have networks of people that are also engaged, or maybe less so, but when you send out an email, might click that link to take action. So we've created action pages for this campaign that makes it really, really easy for people to send a pre-written comment to their legislators that just says, hey, these forests are important. Please fund more conservation this session. And I'll send, I think maybe, Carol, could I maybe send you resources that could be sent as like a follow-up email? Because I'll also put the links in the chat, but I know links can get lost in chat. So is that something that's possible, or is it better to just share them via the chat?
She's nodding. I don't know. I'm trying to
Okay.
unmute
No,
her.
I'm
There we
saying
go.
yes. I'm saying yes. Yep. Yes.
Great. Okay,
Thank you.
wonderful.
And we've just got a couple more minutes to do questions.
Yeah, I think that's it for me. I'll put the links in the chat once the next speaker starts. Are there any questions in the couple of minutes that we have? I'm looking at the chat. We can't endorse candidates given our nonprofit status. Yeah, but we're really hoping for the next land commissioner to take a really strong stand on conserving mature forests. And I think there are a couple of candidates that would maybe do that. And there's a question for Kate. This actually might be a really important question to have answered before my time is up. Kate, would you be willing to answer this question that Karen just posted?
Sorry, which question?
Oh, the question is, can you clarify the league's position on this issue?
Oh, the league has resolved. The state league has resolved to protect all mature forests in the state of Washington, based on two careful studies and a whole list of positions that are available for your viewing pleasure in a program in action on our website. I did want to mention there will be an action alert in the legislative newsletter next Sunday night, Monday morning. So please look for that. Actually, our lobby team wanted to make sure that we were, that we delayed just a tiny bit until we got past this cutoff date.
But thank you for sharing that in the upcoming newsletter. That's wonderful. That's so helpful. Time is up. I see one last question in the chat about when the land is put into conservation, what happens to it. So those lands will receive conservation status. They'll still be managed by DNR, but they'll have special conservation status and be managed in the same way that other conservation state lands are managed.
Mary's not on board yet, by the way, so we can keep going with a couple more questions until we see her in the participant window.
Okay, great. I see France's hand is raised. Do you have a question, please?
Yeah. So what you're talking about are not bills, but they're budget asks.
That's right. And we just have one budget ask, a single budget ask.
And you are aware that because of the initiatives that the state legislature is totally unable to plan a realistic budget because of the possibility of those initiatives causing mayhem for our funding.
Yeah, right. And what we've seen, the reaction to that is a money grab. So people are trying to, legislators are really looking at these funds that were generated through the CCA and trying to spend them up as quickly as possible. So because if there's a chance that they would go away, then that's money that was left sitting on the table. So the money generated from the CCA and that's in this natural climate solutions account, I feel fairly confident will be spent this legislative session. And the question is on what?
Okay, super. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
We still have time.
Karen, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Well, I just want to remind folks or let folks know that there is a lot you can do at your county level with this. And one of the pieces that we've learned and have been working on is often these proposed lands for preservation have to be requested at the county level. So the county council actually has to say, we want to preserve these parcels. We want to be on the list. We want to preserve parcels. So I just wanted to say that we've been successful in Snohomish County with Kate and Brow's help in making that ask and actually getting the Snohomish County Council to unanimously say, we want to be on the list, and then work through the parcel identification. So it's just because it passes at the state level, should these dollars be put in, there's going to be additional work that has to happen to get your county council to actually ask for preservation. So it's just important to know that multiple step project here.
I want to jump in for a second before we take any other questions. We might have Mary online under a different login. We're not sure. Do we have Mary Hall online?
This is Emmett O'Connell in Mary's office, and she's just transitioning from one meeting to the next meeting. So she'll be here momentarily.
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Okay, we can go on another minute or two here, I think.
Could I just jump in to follow up with Karen's comment to say that I'm new issue chair for the League of Women Voters of Washington, and one of my aspirations is to help local leagues do the kind of work that we've done here in Snohomish County. So if that is, Thurston County is all over it. Their county council is on board. So I am interested. I'm building tools for other local leagues to use. So emails, strategies, please get in touch if you are interested in working at your local level.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for Kate is amazing. Kate is such a rock star when it comes to this issue. I feel very, very, very grateful to you, Kate, for the work and determination that you have. Susan, do you have a question?
I believe there's been a lot of research in the last couple of years that forest preservation goes much better if there is a significant amount of acreage that goes together in terms of trees sharing, help for each other, all that kind of thing. Some of the acreages you've mentioned are really small, and I'm wondering if you could address that problem a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a great question. So the areas that we're proposing are small. As I mentioned before, and that's a political reason, not a ecological reason. But all of the areas that we're looking at do have some adjacency or connectivity to larger areas that are conserved and are thriving. And also it's a sad reality that because of the intensive industrial management of these lands, that in some places there are these little pockets that aren't very big, and they are these little hubs of biodiversity that are remnants, and once they're gone, that whole area has nothing. So while it's not ideal, right? To have these little pockets, they still play a really, really significant role. For example, up where I live, there's a 40-acre plot, a parcel that was slated to be logged. And we took out a mycologist to that area, and he found mushroom species that he had never seen before, and just this little island of biodiversity. And so I think you're absolutely right, and they are much needed given the crisis that we're in.
Thanks, Brel. I think we do have Mary online now, but I want to thank you again for your time this morning. This has been really great and very informative. We really appreciate it a lot and all your efforts.
You're welcome. And thank you to all of you for all of the incredible engagement and activism that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Mary, I can see your name. I can't see you yet. Can you hear us?
I can, and I have my camera on.
Oh, yay. Okay, I can see you now. Wonderful,
Okay,
wonderful. And
perfect.
we gave you an introduction at the start of the session, so everybody knows who you are. But I'll just say again that Mary is the Thurston County Auditor, and I will let her fill in any other things that she needs to up front. We have till, I know you have a hard stop at 11, so just go until you need to jump off.
Okay, and my understanding is you want me to talk about auditor legislative priorities for the year. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And we someone expressed interest too in even year elections from an auditor's viewpoint, but I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to cover in the time that you have. So
okay, great. Well, the first thing I guess I will talk about is the auditor priority bills. We work closely with the Washington Association of County Officials, which is made up of the auditor, the assessor, the sheriff, the treasurer, the clerk, all of the affiliates, a prosecutor, with the exception of commissioners. So it's all of county government. And so we come up with 2 priority bills that are auditor priorities, and then Waco also lobbies very hard for us. Probably the most important bill for us, and it's been a bill for 4 years now, is the harassment of election officials. And as you know, back in 2020, there was a tremendous amount of harassment received for elections officials. We've had a tremendous amount of resignations across the country and in Washington state. What we're seeing right now, and recently here in Washington, are a lot of frontline staff leaving because they're too getting harassed and things like that. So it passed the House 8611. And it's in the Senate. We've ran it for 3 years. It passed unanimously in the Senate 2 years in a row. Couldn't make it through the House. Last year we started it in the House, couldn't get it through the Senate. So we feel pretty confident. However, calls or notes to lawmakers are always appreciated. Unfortunately, the Republican Party now is picking this up as being an anti-free speech type of effort on the auditors. And they also want to fold in like signature gatherers as having the same protections and things like this. But really, this is just aligning state law with current law, where it is a felony to harass an election official if it's online or via email. So any type of cyber harassment. We just want to bring that if somebody knocks on my door and threatens my life, that too is a felony. Our next priority bill is simplifying our change of address process in our voter registration database. As you probably are aware, we now have a statewide voter registration database, and the laws surrounding how we change registrations when people move from one county to another are very antiquated, and they really haven't kept up with technology. So this is a great bill. Really, all it does is allow us, if a voter transfers from Thurston County to Pierce County, the voter doesn't have to re-register. We can just transfer them like if they moved from the west side to the east side of Olympia. So it's a very simple bill. We feel pretty good about that. The other bill that's important to us, and this is just a Wasaka priority because we only get 2 Waco priorities, is our voter registration challenge bill. And I don't know how much you follow events that happen, but we've had some pretty good challenges that got a lot of news, were pretty public in the past. One was with Lisa Partially about her residence, and one was about C. Davis about his residence. And there is a place for voter challenges, right? When, say, legislators don't live in the district, but claim they do because they sleep on their brother's couch or whatever. But what's happening today is the election integrity group that's going door to door, knocking on doors and, trying to, they're claiming that our voter registration rolls aren't clean. They're filing a lot of senseless voter registration challenges. In fact, I got 20 at one time last year, and they're incredibly time consuming. It's an administrative process. If it's within a certain amount of time, within an election, the entire canvassing board has to rule in it. So that takes up time from the auditor, prosecutor, and chair of the board. And it's quite a lengthy process. So we're trying to streamline that to where you can't challenge inactive voters. Inactive voters never receive ballots. There are people who we've had mail returned to us as undeliverable. So we don't know where they live. So they go on the inactive list. Then if they miss 2 federal elections, they're canceled, right? So our system is pretty brilliant, actually. It's a self-cleaning system. It just takes a little time, but they're trying to hurry it, challenge a lot of inactive voters, which is senseless because those people are never going to get a ballot anyway. So it's a good bill. Again, I don't know what's up with the right side of the aisle, but they seem to just be throwing a lot of senseless things at them that really aren't true. It's a good bill, and we're really hoping that it passes. It did make it through the Senate, and it's currently moving over to the House. And actually, the Republicans did actually introduce a floor amendment. We worked with them on it because Senator Braun came out with something that was in total violation of the National Voter Registration Act, but the intent was good. So we worked with him on reworking that amendment. So it did pass unanimously out of the Senate, so onto the House. So we're hoping that we get that same cooperation from the Republicans in the House, because what we're concerned about is if they're going to really debate the bills and spend a lot of time on floor debates, the legislature may not want to hear these bills because they have a short session. There's a lot they want to get passed, and it's not worth their time. So we're really working hard, both sides of the aisles, to ensure that that we don't run into opposition for this bill and the other bills. I guess I'll go to the even year election bill from an election administrator's perspective. This is actually more complex than you could imagine. And I want to first talk a little bit about how I view legislation and what I feel my role is as it relates to legislation. I was not elected to be a policy person. So my duties are ensuring, voter participation and that we can administer elections successfully with integrity and transparency. So the even year election bill is a kind of on that borderline for me, because here's what it'll do. If we go to moving all municipal elections to even years, it's going to make our ballot likely flow over into 2 or 3 ballot cards. And having worked in Pierce County when they did ranked choice voting in 2012, I can tell you that it is impossible to reconcile an election when you have 2 ballot cards, because you can only code your ballots with one, which ballot drives turnout. So we have to balance ballots received minus ballots rejected equals ballots counted, and that has to balance. And I don't think we'll be able to do that if we end up with multiple ballot cards, because we're going to flow over. And, you know, I've thought about, well, can they come up with a code for each page of a ballot? You know, we can't have it tied back to the voter, because you don't want to know, you don't want to have a ballot associated to a voter. So it would really take a lot for our vendors and printers and our election management tabulation vendors to collaborate to see how they could code a set of ballots to where we would know that, you know, 3 of the ballots or 2 of the ballots, or if they just returned 1 of the ballots, was a single vote for a voter. So that's one of the concerns that we have. The other question we have, which doesn't really tie back to, you know, process and procedures for elections, but is the question why? And so then I started putting on my candidate hat, because I am in an elected position. And I went back to when I ran in 2013 versus when I ran in 2014 and 2018. And I can tell you from a candidate perspective, if I was a city council member, I would not want to go in an even year and have to compete for campaign funds with legislators and Congress people, or, you know, street corners for yard signs or radio spots, or ad space. I feel like it would just get lost and people wouldn't really pay attention to those elections. And the reason that cities and towns decided to go to odd year elections was because there was so much fall off at the bottom of the ballot. So I'm not convinced that it's going to increase votes. It's going to increase turnout in those elections, but I'm not convinced that it's going to increase votes for those positions, because they're going to be so far down ballot that I think we're going to see a lot of voter fatigue. So anyway, that's kind of my viewpoint on that bill. And again, it's not up to me. It's up to the legislature and it's up to the jurisdictions. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of those or anything else. Okay.
I see a question from Chris.
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
I was curious about other places around the country that may have gone to multi-page ballots, right? Because you're talking about the vendors, and so I was like, would we be the first place ever to do that? Right? No.
No, there are places that do have multi-page ballots. They just don't have the strict reconciliation rules that we have in Washington State. We do things a lot differently. I like to say we're way ahead of the game when it comes to accuracy and best practices and things like that. So it would be we would sacrifice one thing for another, essentially. Our currently my team balances to 0 most elections. It's rare when they don't, and you know, we can usually explain, you know, why, but most of the time we balance to 0, and that would not be possible. So I don't think they have a strict reconciliation requirements in other states.
I see a question in the chat from Leona saying, do elections have to be on the same day?
Federal elections, yes, need to be on the same day, but it's just general elections. You ever wonder why they end up where they are? It's the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So it's all about that first Monday. But as far as spring elections and our state primary, that's written into statute. So the legislature can and has moved those around. We used to have 6 elections a year. We had them in February, March, April, May, September, and November. And when they moved the president or the state primary they modified those other dates also.
And I see there's a question from Arnold. Arnold, you'll need to unmute. Oh, maybe you have. Go ahead.
Yes, I have. Thank you. I was wondering on the same line, if it's not advantageous to have multi-ballot pages, for an election, how does that compare with authorizing several elections during the year? Instead of one election with multiple ballots, have 3 or 4 elections with, picking up different portions of the electorate, the electors for the year.
Well, it's sort of established that way now. Typically, school districts run their levy and bond elections in February. Fire districts tend to run their elections in April, and some in the, August primary. And then in odd years, we have, the directors and commissioners for school district and fire district and cities and towns, and port. So from an administrator position and ballot real estate, which is what we call it, it's actually set up pretty well, because we can go to a 17-inch ballot, but our system won't handle anything longer than that. And we also have limitations on font sizes, which in my opinion are set too small. But we can't go any smaller than certain fonts. So I think it's set pretty well as it is right now. I think
Thank you.
cramming everything onto one ballot would be difficult. Other countries don't vote on as many things as we do. Most of the down ballot races are appointed positions in the rest of the world.
And Marilyn, I see your hand up.
Oh, let's see. Am I on mute? Can you hear me?
I can hear
Good
you.
to see you again, Mary.
Nice to see you.
I have a question. Last week we had a speaker, Andrew Villeneuve from Northwest Progressive Institute, and he was talking about odd year elections and how, as you say, voter fatigue, people not wanting to vote in odd year elections. And what would you suggest for this? Because on the one hand, if it's even, we've got too long a ballot. And in the odd years, then we've got voter fatigue where people just don't turn out. What's your suggestion on that?
Well, it's outside of my control to a point. I can do, voter outreach and educate people as to why these positions are important and people should participate. But I really think that it starts in schools, and I think we don't do a really good job of educating children and teenagers of why these are important and what these positions do and how the decisions are made on things like, are you going to have a skateboard park? Is there going to be a public park in your neighborhood? And so I think the problem is bigger than just elections, and it's lack of interest in these positions where the problem lies. And I commend our legislature. We're very accustomed to receiving voter pamphlets every election, but I can assure you that doesn't happen across the country. So if you think our turnout is bad at 30%, which is a typical odd year election for us or special, I mean, they can be 7 and 8% in other states, because number one, they have polling places. They don't vote by mail. We make it really convenient. Plus, we put the information in front of the voter through a voter's guide, and most states don't do that. So again, we have, thank you, Sam Hunt and other people who've been really involved in election policy through the legislature, but we have some of the best laws, the best accountability, the best practices, the best accessibility. I mean, it's a great balance between accessibility and security in Washington State. And I would love to just pick this up and move it across the country.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
See a question from Janine. Ranked choice voting may be more challenging from a logistic standpoint, but as an election administrator, do you believe it's a fairer way to elect candidates for the people?
I answer this. Again, I don't weigh in on policy decisions, and I think that is a policy issue. However, I'm the only auditor or election administrator in the state who's conducted a ranked choice voting election. I conducted 2 of them while I was serving in Pierce County, where I spent 17 years running elections there. It's not really that much more difficult, to be honest. I mean, it was back then just because of systems hadn't matured like they have now. Now, at least with the software I use, I could put ranked choice voting and plurality voting on the same ballot. So, and whether or not they're fairer or I think the only difference really I can see is that the campaigning is different because the candidates want that second vote. So, you know, they're not so cutthroat, and I think people talk about issues more from, you know, the little research I've done for Maine and other states that do them. But, you know, people are afraid of what they don't know. And I think people fear ranked choice voting, but it's really just another step in the process. You have to run an algorithm at the end. What I'm not fond of, though, is the way the bill is structured now is there are 2 types of ranked choice voting that they want to bring forward. And one is a single transferable vote. So that means that you would narrow, say, 10 candidates down to 5 to move to the general election. And it's a totally different process than instant runoff voting or ranked choice voting, as you know, the other system is. I would prefer that the state do one type. And I always viewed that one of the benefits of ranked choice voting is you eliminate a primary, right? That's how it was sold for a long time, that it saved costs. And single transferable vote doesn't do that. And I think that, you know, we have a hard enough time getting people to understand what city council members and school district directors do. I think it would be incredibly challenging to educate voters to 2 different types of ranked choice voting. So I enjoyed ranked choice voting. I conduct ranked choice votings for the city of Olympia when they have vacancies. And it's, you know, I work with Fair Vote. It's one of the fun things I do. And again, I don't really have an opinion. I don't oppose it. I don't support it, but I know that we can do it.
Carol, I see your hand up.
Yes, I'm just wondering, Mary, do you have any thoughts about the universal civic voting? It's still alive, I believe. Sam Hunt's proposal. Just out of curiosity.
So I'm going to put on my non-auditor hat. You know, I'm all about access and participation. And if you would have asked me this 35 years ago, before I got into this industry, I would have said, absolutely, everybody should have to vote. It's their civic duty. You know, everybody has to pay taxes. Everybody has to get a driver's license to drive. Everybody has to have insurance. The least they can do is vote, right? But I'm the county auditor and I conduct elections, and I don't think it would be a big burden for us. I think, you know, it would affect turnout because we would have a lot of people, I mean, it's your right to not vote also. But we already do a fantastic job of getting voter eligible citizens registered. You know, we're at about 80% in Thurston County, but yeah, we've got another 20% to go. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I would love to, you know, what I have offered is, I think that's a big lift currently, but I would be happy to work with the legislature to make sure that, you know, if it moves forward, I want to make sure that it's not a burden for election administrators, and that the laws are written in such a way that we still have all of the great things we have in place in Washington State, which is, you know, security balanced with accessibility.
Mary, we're at time, so I don't want to put you on the spot. I see we do have another question or two, but I'll let you call that one.
Sure, go ahead. I'm looking for my calendar to see what's next.
It's like, Chris?
So I just had a couple of updates on the bill, House Bill 2250. The amendment was actually passed that was working with the auditors to remove the STV portion of the bill last week. So it no longer contains multi-winner form of ranked choice voting in this version of the bill now.
Actually, it does, at least the way I saw it. What they
the
did,
amendment said
it's
it was
not-
supposed to remove it. But I think you're right. There's still a mention in the bill even after the amendment was integrated. I do believe that's true.
I think originally they had it to where that could potentially be, you know, multiple jurisdictions. One could choose single transferable vote. I thought it was still in the primary that you could use that. But, you know, auditors as an association don't support ranked choice voting. You know, again, they just don't want to have to do it. That's not my position or role. It's doable, but I do think it's a lot to ask. You know, if they took single transferable vote out altogether and it was simply ranked choice voting like it is in most, you know, 99% of other jurisdictions across the country, you know, I think I appreciate that. We don't like to be the first for things like this. You know, there are very, very few jurisdictions using single transferable vote. And when it comes to voting and things like that, I just, not only from an administrative standpoint of having the software that conducts two different types, but again, you know, we want voters to feel confident in how they're voting, and it's already challenging for enough of our population. So I really don't support single transferable vote.
So it was Zoli 368 supposedly removed it. So that's what
yeah. And we thought that too. And then I read it on Friday, and it was still there, but I hope you're right. I do. Because if it passes, you know, I mean, it's not up to us. Like I said, it's up to the legislature, and we just conduct elections that they, you know, by the rules they put in place. And, you know, as a state, we do it incredibly well. So I do have to run, but this is great. I don't know that I've talked to a group before about our legislative priorities and legislation. And it's, I tend to somehow end up to be legislative chair too many years in my career. I think I'm gonna, work on training somebody else for next year, but this was a very, very fun discussion and conversation. So thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
Mary, thank you so much. This was really great. We so appreciate your time today.
Okay, and I need to make a disclaimer. The opinion of the Thurston County Auditor does not necessarily reflect other auditors across Washington State. Have a great day.
Thanks. Thanks again, Mary. Thank you. And everybody, thank you for Zooming in. We really appreciate it. We hope you'll come back next Monday when we're going to have two speakers talk to us about zero waste legislation. Important topic. So with that, I'm going to sign off and hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.